welcome everybody. And today is all about digging into understanding cannabinoid research. I think everybody has been kind of seeing the frenzy of headlines about the recent study done by OSU on the interaction between acidic cannabinoids and the COVID virus. And so it's been in the news a lot. So knowing that we have cannabinoid experts as part of our team and in our community, we thought it'd be the perfect chance to hear their analysis and have them help us understand how to interpret, all these things that we'll be reading about that will surely be continuing on more and more as we go, and with legalization and with better access to using these compounds. So without further ado, I'll let Mary and Jessica introduce themselves. And if you could kind of share about your background with cannabinoid research, I think that'll be a great foundation for everybody to start with.
Sure. Thank you so much, Sue, for hosting this. As always, we are smiling under our masks here. We're actually here today at the Ames Institute, which is a clinic that SMJ Consulting is a part of. And we are so proud to be part of the inception of the clinic, because here we're doing really groundbreaking focus on emerging plant-based medicines, including cannabis, the fight for the right for patients to use psilocybin. And the benefit of what we have to offer once we start working with patients in the clinic is taking information and data and really translating that into the practical application of what's happening. So, in the industry and in medicine and in day-to-day cannabinoid use. And I think it really comes in handy when we're talking about research studies like this, because there's some great information, but there's also a lot of misinformation and misinterpretation about research, whether it's something of this value or bits and pieces that people are reading online. So we're so happy that you chose this as a topic and invited us to speak. And I'm here with my partner, Jessica Streufert.
Hello.
Jessica has a strong background in the hospitals and in medicine as an RRT. So yeah, hopefully today we can just take a look at some of the information that's out there and being disseminated. And we can shed a little light on how to intake some of the content, because I think we're going to start seeing it more and more, and just understanding the lens at which to look at these research is really important.
Yeah. So, you all, in addition to the work you do with Polite in helping to formulate products, and, you work with patients on a weekly basis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so can you just give a little bit of context on the nature of, cannabinoid therapy is even a new word for some people, So what can you kind of share a little bit of light about the work you do through SMJ Consulting?
Sure. Well, Jessica, feel free to jump in, but
can you still hear us okay?
Yeah.
Okay. We see us frozen on the screen. So
no, you're good.
Okay. So part of really what spurred the inception of SMJ Consulting at Ames, over 12 years ago, we started this, and Ames is a product of what all the focus has been in about the last 4 or 5 years, is helping people understand how to use cannabis products for their own specific needs and conditions, but also coordinating with medical practitioners about product availability, what is happening in the industry that may or may not coincide with what's happening in research and in product development. And if you want to give a perspective from the hospital, how it's evolved and changed, I think that's really important.
Yeah, you mean how we use cannabis now in the hospital, how it's coming to the hospital, or just?
Yeah, well, I know when you and I first started working together, there was a lack thereof.
Yeah, there was a lack. No one, even when I started learning about it, and I still worked in the neonatal ICU at the hospital, and even for me to talk about it to any of my coworkers, I could have got fired on the spot or lose my license, with the state. So, but everybody knew a little bit. They knew enough to be dangerous and not quite understand, and to get it wrong, and to build the stigma, or to be completely on the other end. So I had to step away from the hospital to even really fully grasp into it, and to be able to talk to other people, and then for us to even to go talk to doctors about it. Yes. I had to be out of the hospital and to educate them, because their whole perception was so skewed that it didn't match up with any of the actual facts. So now though, but now we actually go in the hospitals, they agree upon it, they put it in the MAR, which is part of the pharmaceutical thing that we keep check of what you're giving your patients. And so even the pharmacists allow us to put it on there. The hospitals now, Children's of Philadelphia is actually doing studies of cannabis on their patients there. The study was done in a hospital, so now I feel like we've broken down that door, that barrier finally, and we can talk about it freely without feeling that we're doing something wrong, and then it's open that everybody can discuss it now and get on the same page. So there's tons of progress has happened even since I left the hospital.
And I think the one thing that Jessica touched on is that, it's lack of practitioner knowledge, right? And it's not a knock on any practitioner, but when the education is not being disseminated, they don't have the opportunity as new practitioners to learn about it, as seasoned practitioners to jump into something new, right? And again, there's a lot of misinformation. And I will tell you, one of the driving factors for me to really get out there and start educating doctors, I'm an educator, right? By nature. I mean, that is my formal background, was that we knew what was happening in research, but it was not being applied to patients and the general public. And so it was really going and telling the doctors, no, research exists, right? So one thing we talked about is that definition of what is research, right? So when a doctor says there's not enough research, they're not meaning there's not enough small research. They are really providing the context of this not FDA approved research of which we can act upon, right? So that was then. Now there is more that is really opening the door. You have the Epidiolex trial, you have overseas trials that are happening in Israel. So those type of research avenues are being opened, which is offering credibility, right? But what we want to talk about is research like this that is happening in vivo and in vitro. So in vivo means in animal models, and in vitro means in petri dishes, right? So you look at the general scope of how research begins. Jessica, in our previous conversation, said it just starts with an idea. You get people questioning, you get inquisitive practitioners, inquisitive doctors, clinicians, and then it takes a collaboration of efforts of people to say, okay, how can we peel off that first layer, right? So that first layer is collecting observational and anecdotal information. So you get that proof of concept, but then, and that's really what happened with us in the clinic was this is great. We know cannabinoids really are working with patients as, everybody is reporting, but our question is, how do we find consistency in what really is working, right? And in the cannabis plant, there are hundreds of compounds that can be effective. So now we have to start eliminating those variables and finding what compounds are initiating what response. So that's kind of next level. And if you look at the track of how research happens, the FDA component, sometimes it takes years and years and years to get there. But it doesn't mean just because something's FDA approved, that is the end all be all. Yeah. So I always give people an example of, the vitamin that folic acid that they give to pregnant women. Okay, I have 4 children. Jessica has 2. This is, and every time you walk in there, so start taking your folic acid. That is not FDA approved for pregnant women, right? That is something that it has been known. It has been something that's been reported on. It's been something that's been accepted. Okay. But that is literally anecdotal and observational research in full play. So when we speak with doctors and practitioners, Jessica and I have the opportunity to educate internationally on this topic and really presenting the research. One of my, I'll say nighttime positions is educating oncologists in Japan. And so we go through a platform, we work one-on-one with their patients, and it's just getting that information out there. And they too are looking for the research. Their merit and definition of research is different than what is applicable in the United States. So it's really about stepping out of that box and looking at the perspective of who is researching, what is being done, what's the target audience, and who is funding that research. Because we live in a political society. There's agendas in everything. And a fun little piece of information is that to get federal approval or federal money towards research, you have to look at what could potentially be a negative impact on people if you're looking with THC or something that is not federally legal. So they would say, we want to apply for a research grant and we want to look at how THC can negatively impact, a neurological function in the brain, well, that could be funded as long as you're looking for something negative. If a positive result comes of it, then that's fine.
Great. Well, that's the Donald Tashkin study in UCLA, right. The pulmonologist, 2004. He was looking up how THC can cause cancer in the lungs, and he ended up proving against it. But that was his whole concept and his idea of how the negative, how it can increase COPD and cancer, right. And he proved the opposite with nicotine. So again,
so does research always have to start with some sort of? So that was his hypothesis, that it would have a negative effect.
Negative impact. Yeah.
Or the kind of showed the opposite, right?
Showed the opposite. Right. He proved himself wrong.
Yeah, and it's about getting creative. Now, when you have legal compounds like CBD, CBG that don't fall under that THC, you can take any approach you want. So there's recent studies comparing the application of CBD and CBG for pediatric brain tumors. I won't go too much into it, but then they did a subsequent study where they tested it in combination with temolazide, which is a chemotherapy. So it's really fun to watch these new emerging compounds being studied, because we're understanding
without the limitations that people had with trying to research just THC.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's something that, really kind of points in the direction of this study. Is everybody saw this headline and said, oh my gosh, hey, this is something new. Yeah. So you had people who are skeptical looking into it. Yeah. And then you have people who felt like it provided them validity and credibility and the message that they've always been saying, right? Yeah. Everything from, your average everyday cannabis consumer wanting to prove it to their parents or their siblings to your medical practitioner saying there is something to this. Yeah. But there was also an issue with how everybody absorbed this and started sharing it, because it also took away the credibility of what this study was aiming to do. Yeah. Right.
Maybe just for those people who maybe aren't familiar with the details of the nature of the OSU, maybe just saw a one-word headline. Can you give just like a high-level overview of what this study was about and kind of the outcomes?
So they were trying to take, which we love the fact that their whole idea was they were taking minor cannabinoids, CBD and CBG, cannabidiol and cannabidiol, but they're taking the acidic components and they're trying to apply it to, and this isn't a dish, this isn't to a human trial, this isn't a petri dish, but they're trying to apply it to certain proteins. Then these proteins are what the virus attaches to, and that's how you get COVID. So they were trying to take these two acidic components and apply them to these proteins and see if they would block the virus from being attached, and they did. They proved that it did, which is fantastic. I love the whole concept, but again, this is in a petri dish. This is not on a mouse or human trials, and the amount and the quantity that they had to use of these components is something that we don't consume. So it's the concept is awesome. We love that they're going that way. That somebody thought about it. That it was at a hospital. That they're they are looking at this idea, but also this study was done before Omicron came. This is done a couple variants back. So the COVID's already mutated. So this doesn't even going to apply to that study anymore. So
that's something that people don't realize.
So fast, and the researchers always a lag time. But so they got, at least in the petri dish, they tried to apply it, which they proved themselves right. But again, it's the amount of the cannabinoids, the acidic components, and then it was in a dish itself.
So I think the important thing is noting this is amazing, right? Yeah. It's fantastic that they are studying this. It's fantastic that they are finding positive response. It's the interpretation of the study. I mean, I can't tell you how many people in the industry, right, are calling, I need CBDA, I need CBGA. And then you have people saying, let's market it. Let's say we have CBDA in our vape cartridges. Okay, let's really come back to, and you'll hear me say this in every lecture, interview, the core values of why we're all here. We want to be true to the plant and what it can do for humans. So if we over sensationalize it, we're not doing anybody any favors, right? We're actually making ourselves look less credible. And so, on that note too, it's also something that we can take and say, okay, we are one step further, right? We are one step further to opening the door to these conversations, one step further to putting the pieces of the puzzle together. The other
progress. It's a
Yeah.
huge progress
Yeah.
to even get to this point to be talking about
Right.
this right now. Is,
Mhm.
The other thing that I think is really notable about this study that really helps is that those in the cannabis community, myself included, I mean, I've been involved in the cannabis community for 20 years, right?
Yes.
But the thing is that everybody has always held steadfast to whole plant and entourage effect and needing, all the cannabinoids, which I am 100% on board with. But I really want to kind of challenge people to look at their perspective, because those people, myself at one point included, that really focused on whole plant, let's ask ourselves why whole plant is so important. It's because you have all of these minor cannabinoids. But when you start using cannabis in its processed form, where THC is the primary constituent, so when that happens, you are losing a lot of those minor cannabinoids. As we had said, you have a product that sits on the shelf, you might not even be consuming those minor ones. The minor cannabinoids in small amounts are so powerful to isolate and extract them and use that to enhance the endocannabinoid system and the entourage effect. That's an amazing thing. And it's not, some people say that bastardize the plant. Okay. So to a certain extent, I understand where you're coming from. But I challenge everyone, when you're consuming THC, what are you doing? We call it activating it, but really, in essence, you're kind of isolating it, right? You're relying on that one compound to target a receptor system that is open to so many other compounds.
Yes.
So, and the research that has been done on THC, when we say, or we find that THC has anti-inflammatory properties, well, to what percent? And can you compare that to the anti-inflammatory properties of CBD or CBG? Because they are actually far greater.
way greater.
Which is why you need so much THC to get to that point when you might not need as much of these other compounds. So
that have those benefits at a higher level, right? I mean, like more concentrated properties.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to say, I know we're talking about this research in COVID, but so research has been done on THC targeting cancer cells, right? So, and we hear that so often coming into the clinic. I need RSO, I need 1,000 milligrams a day. Okay, well, let's go back for a minute. Okay, when you're saying that you're going to put all your eggs in the THC basket to target one of hundreds of different types of mutations of cancer, that's in honest, that I don't want to say that's a fool's route, but in essence, that's like a fool's errand, right?
It goes back to thinking about chemo. When we started with one, now we know there's multiple different things that we're targeting, different bodies. I mean, it's different lymphatic systems, different areas. It's not just all in one basket of THC. It's not the beginning of, we have different kind of medications for different areas.
And we came to that by default. We had people coming in saying, I'm trying, I cannot even work my way up, because I am so impacted by THC. Now I can't use this treatment. So we started, for us at the Ames Institute, it's about trying to find a solution to stumbling blocks, right? So again, you get pregnant women who would not use THC, did not want to use THC. So we searched to work with companies that could isolate these other compounds that may have had a similar effect. And when you get the positive response and you can collect that, even if it is anecdotal data, we're a little farther along than anecdotal, but you can apply that to formulations for real world. Because look, people out here, whether it's Corona, Omicron, cancer, you don't have 10 years to wait. So let's take
for the FDA approved human trial.
Right.
Well, like we said earlier, even if you're on the fast track, and fast track starts with the idea to the in vivo, in vitro, the petri dish, the mouse, to getting to human trials, to getting to those studies and those answers, 2 to 3 years is kind of your fast track. So it's, we kind of have to start here, see what we can see, our patient trends, what we're finding from those studies that were in vitro and in vivo, taking that and applying it to the patient. That's the fast route. That's how we're finding it in the clinic.
Yeah.
So I think, part of the excitement is with this study is that, like you were both mentioning, you on the inside, working on the inside of the industry for a decade, you've known that it's not just about THC, and a lot of the therapeutic benefits are actually coming from the other minor, cannabinoids. And minor is a relative term, because what's a minor cannabinoid today could become a major,
could be the major component,
right? So I think, what this study is popularizing is the attention to those other minor cannabinoids, right?
Yes.
So for a lot of people, most people have only heard of CBD, THC, and if you take it to the next step of acidic compounds, to a lot of people, like acidic compounds are completely new. Can you share a bit about, where are we even able to access acidic compounds now as an everyday hemp consumer?
So typically, naturally, the acidic compounds are from the raw material, the raw plant. But when you're talking about acids versus non-acids, it's really about molecular structure, right? You're looking at the molecule of CBG and its transformation into other cannabinoids. So if you've done kind of the Google, when I say Google Doc, I mean like document, research, you'll find that acidic compounds are more prevalent in the early stages of the cannabis plant's life. And then, upon harvest, as it dries, all of these compounds change. So I'm going to kind of answer that question with a little bit of a story too. I remember watching something with David Bierman, and he had a patient he was working with, and she said, "Oh, I planted all my cannabis, and for every cup of juice, I plant 2 more plants." That's wonderful, but it's not feasible, right? So, and it's just not even available. And that's what I was talking about with these the FICO oils. Yes, they have a lot of acid compounds in there, but it's really difficult to harness those. So that's why I really want to, encourage being open to isolating these, because in that way we can find out what power that they have and accentuate, other whole plant products, right? So,
and like as people in this industry, the goal is access, right? So
right, exactly.
How many people can actually grow their own plants and then consume raw leaves to get acidic compounds? So to make a true impact on the public, it's really about finding ways to make these beneficial compounds as accessible and safe and consistent as possible.
Well, right? And in this study, they talk about cannabidiol, which we know is a stem cell. So if somebody's trying to grow this, you have to get it in infancy or find a chemovar that's high enough concentration of CBD. So even the dosage they use in this study is such high concentrations that you wouldn't be able to plant
to grow it yourself
and put it in your tea. Well, that's not. You'd have to isolate. You'd have to find something of CBG being isolated to even get to that. Not even near the quantity, but something.
Well, and that's really kind of. I know this isn't about pushing polite or but I do want to educate on it. That was the overall goal of creating the polite products, right? Not only harnessing accessible high amounts of the minor cannabinoids, and we're continuing to develop, but also combining them with Ayurvedic herbs. So I was actually challenged at a dinner the other night that one of the herbs we use, it was peppermint, doesn't, assist with sleep. And I appreciate that. But one thing that we look at a pharmacological level is how do these different herbs act like terpenes, right, as driving factors into the cells. And that's why we rely on our naturopathic doctors here who also understand cannabinoids to really put the pieces together, right? So if you're going to, really support terpenes and you're going to support, the mechanism of action in the human system, terpenes are essential oils that are evident in multiple channels through nature. So when we're using Ayurvedic herbs, it's the same thing, right? We know that turmeric can interact with the AKT barrier. So there's that can, then make certain CBD compounds work better in the system or faster. So it's about taking the overall general knowledge and sometimes it's just, hey, let's try it and see. Let's try and see what happens. Or let's look at our patients that are getting IV, quercetin or mistletoe, and those that are using isolated compounds, are they doing better than other patients? Well, let's try to combine them and just see how they work. I'm not saying IV cannabinoids. I want to be clear.
We're talking about other things we do. Yeah.
Right.
So in plant-based therapies world.
Exactly, right. And then when you're using them in conjunction with other products. So I feel like I kind of derived.
I have a kind of follow-up question. So because both of you kind of have your finger on the pulse of research much more than an average person would. On one hand, it's early days for cannabinoid research, right? Because it was illegal to even research for decades, but now we are starting to be able to. In other countries, they may have a head start. Where, if we talk about cannabinoid research, where is most of the focus right now when you look at funding and kind of focus of kind of hypotheses that people are building cannabinoid research around.
I mean, I feel like they're taking off. But I mean, CBD became that was a popular one. So that's really where the study is going. But cannabidiol, that one's picking up. That one, I mean, we've known about it for a while. We used to talk to Dr. Russo about it. We know that he was studying it. So that one is taking off. That one is starting, that stem cell plant is starting to take off. But it's still focused. CBD is still a huge one that's out there because they're still in their trial periods. They're still in that human trial period. So that one's still out there. But CBG is coming up and finally getting out there like we did with this Oregon State hospital.
So, and the other thing that I want to kind of jump in on that, as you said, where's research going? I think it's important also to know, and Sue, I know you know this, but this is more for the public. You know, research on cannabis is not new. You know, Meshulam has been doing it since, you know, the 60s. So it's about what is being accepted at the public level and what's being accepted at the medicinal level. So now it's the emergence of research. And that's the other thing is there's some studies people will, you know, kind of hang their hat on. And these are studies from, you know, 1992, right? So look at the date of the studies, which is wonderful to know that these have continuously been studied and evolving. But we have more extraction methodologies now. We have more information about how cannabinoids work in the system. You know, exactly. So even though those studies may be amazing on how THC, for example, targets cancer cells, right? New studies are showing, and we say new, it's in the last couple of years, about how they impact hormonal driven cancers. And it's kind of deviating away from some of those other studies. So you have to make sure you're really able to look at this with a discerning eye and look at the details. And again, how far we have come from in both the industry, production, medicine, and technology.
And they're all developing at different rates too.
And being able to go ahead and go, oh, the research has changed. Like, you know, we talk about the Simpson oil and THC. Now we know that can be detrimental to certain hormonal cancers. But still, now we are learning not just CBD, that CBG could be even more crucial play in that. So it's being able to adjust, constantly catching up on the new data, reading it, studying it, and not just taking what you learned as that's it. You have to evolve with it.
That's a good point. Trey just put up a great, hey, Trey. Love me some Trey. Trey put up a really great question. He said, you know, we know that patients are looking for that silver bullet. Trey, I so appreciate that you asked this question. You know, a silver bullet, whether you're talking about one cannabinoid or one product, different products, different modalities, right, or modes of the way you ingest it, take it in, can have different impacts. So when we hear someone say, hey, I've been smoking my whole life and I still have high anxiety. Well, okay, that is one mode of administration, you know, really targeting one cannabinoid. When you use other cannabinoids in different methods, whether it's a tincture, whether it's a suppository, you're going to have different effects. And so, you know, that's the other thing is it's not a one size fits all for anyone. You know, some you might need to take for the same reason you take 4 vitamins in the morning and then maybe a sleep capsule at night. You can use different combinations of cannabinoids to have a different effect. Trey, I hope that answered your question. You have the term there, optimal. Exactly. It's optimal because we are individuals, right? So your dose may be different than, you know, your sister's
and how you react to different cannabinoids, right? Some people may have a certain reaction to THC versus CBD versus CBG versus CBN, and it's not a formula that someone else is going to react the same way to that minor cannabinoid or that.
And the other thing to consider, right? So when we take a pharmaceutical approach, the pharmaceutical approach is, okay, this is your compound. It's very cookie cutter. This is your dose, and you have to take it this many hours, right?
ml per kilos across the board.
It's a standardization because doctors can't do the individual with every patient. But with cannabinoid, and it's also not safe to let people go off on their own. But the wonderful thing about cannabinoids,
dosing,
is if you really think about, okay, as humans, we are different people. Our makeup is different. What we put in our bodies is different. So for people who might be looking for sleep assistance or, you know, let's say this, you know, cannabinoids for our autoimmune system and COVID and health and wellness, you know, if you are drinking sugar all day long and have a poor diet and don't exercise, it's not going to do much for you, right?
Yeah.
And if
cannabinoids won't right all your wrongs.
Yes, if you're trying to get sleep at night, most people who are coming to cannabinoids for sleep assistance are probably already taking melatonin or have other medications in their system. You might even try something at night, not thinking it's going to, have some sort of interaction with your medication during the day. Now, that being said, we know cannabinoids are very safe. They have a very, very high safety profile. But it doesn't mean, when we say high safety profile, we're talking about overdosing. It doesn't mean it could cause a paradoxical effect of other medications or other things, herbs you're putting in your body. I mean, I had a patient a while ago send me a list. They said, I tried the new product and I was awake all night. And I said, that's interesting. What else did you take? And I got a whole list of, testosterone boosters and all of these other things. And I said, you're honestly on your way to a potential heart attack with all those herbs. Yeah, it's all natural, but you're still combining this. And we are individual beings with individual variables. So the notion that a one size, one product fits all, it's, you might need more in the morning and less at night. So just think about that, right? Think about what else you're doing, what else you're putting in your body that might have a positive or negative response.
And so, this research is kind of making that connection between COVID and cannabinoids. But I think for you all, there's a bigger picture of just cannabinoids and their impact on general homeostasis and immune function. So can you speak more to that? Because that's probably the more important, bigger picture, right? Beyond strains of COVID and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, Jessica, you can jump
just
in.
Keeping your immune system healthy. I mean, just taking it as somebody's just like, I just take CBG and CBD, I use a 1-to-1 just to keep my immune system boosted and to prevent any kind of anti-inflammatory, inflammatory response. Because I have a torn disc, which it's fine. It's not active. It's not exacerbated. But as long as I'm taking my CBD and CBG combo, it stops it from activating. It stops that inflammation from activating. But it's also boosting my gut and my immune health. And for women, it's great for, your menstrual cycles. It also helps you prevent any kind of cramps and that kind too. So I use it as a preventative and a daily supplement. So it does boost your immune system and decrease any kind of inflammation process that might kick in. So we don't see it as preventing COVID right now, but it definitely can help you prevent those symptoms from kicking in if you have it, or just like we do with some of our cancer patients or our hormonal patients, using it as a supplement to prevent those side effects. So,
and in talking about how it actually prevents it, to keep it really, really high level, is one of the doctors that we work with, Dr. Chris Duhan, often talks about our terrain, right? The way our bodies are already, it's kind of what I was talking about with being an individual. We all have cancer cells in our body. It's whether or not you provide the terrain for them to feed upon. We look at people who, we're hearing about people get COVID who are asymptomatic and test positive, who have symptoms and test negative. How these different viruses or our immune system in general, the flu, I'm talking about anything, how they manifest themselves in our system is very different. And by using cannabinoids, especially CBD, CBG, as Jessica was talking about, how they balance your system, we need to think about, a lot of people hear about the Cb1 receptors in our central nervous system and the Cb2 receptors in our peripheral system. Okay. Those receptors are like portals almost. And when the cannabinoids interact or unlock those portals, they create a series of response in your body, essentially a chemical response, so that your body...
Is it like the spike protein, what the OSU study was? Is it the same?
Attaching to the spike protein, blocking the negative. Yeah.
It's how your body responds to the interaction of these, toxins or invaders coming in.
Yeah.
So you have, like, a lot of times a really healthy person is going to stave off a cold when it enters their body. On that note, you hear about people doing triathlons who get cancer, and you're like, how can that be? They've actually overstressed their terrain, right? They've broken down their terrain by being so athletic and healthy that sometimes they're more susceptible to it. So that's where cannabinoids can really help find, like, help internally find that balance, right? If you're very healthy and you're taking it, it's going to help with your muscle repair so that energy isn't expended elsewhere, because it's all about transfer of oxygen. And I mean, I don't know if we want to go into that.
Yeah, but even you say you're feeling fine, you're taking this, all of a sudden there's a stressor, there's an environmental stressor. Kid gets sick, something about a job, your car tire, that stress. If you already have the cannabinoids in your system, that's going to help you deal with that better without having that spike of that cortisol or something else shooting up in your body. So it's keeping those chemicals in your body that you may not even know may occur that day. Your endorphins, your like I said, the cortisol. So it's already helping create that balance that you don't even know may occur within that day. Just the environmental stressors.
So these connections between cannabinoids and their impact on inflammation and immunity, are they already at the level of having research like prove these connections, or is it that there's so much overwhelming kind of anecdotal and patient feedback that it's kind of beyond needing to be proven by research?
So, no. I mean, I think it always needs to be proven. But again, when we say, it's to your credit, Sue, this is a great question, right? But what does it mean to be proven? Yeah. When we are looking to prove, we know that CBD impacts the cytokine response in the body, right? We can theorize
Can you explain what that means for someone that's never heard that?
The cytokine response is really the way your body responds. And again, I'm going to keep it high level.
It's a chemical in your body that increases inflammation. So if you get injured or hurt, your body releases this chemical called cytokines. And then that it's supposed to help activate your immune system, but sometimes it can be overprocessed. And CBD blocks that signal, quells that reaction, and decreases the cytokine release.
Okay. So, for example, it can really help with reducing inflammation. But for patients who need that, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here. It increases the ability to fight things off. But for example, if you have a bloodborne cancer like leukemia, when you already have cells, rapidly producing to fight it off, you don't want to exacerbate those, right? Okay. So it's so.
And this is just basic kind of cellular biology of any disease.
Exactly. So yes, we can prove that CBD reduces the cytokine response, but we can also prove that it enhances it. So it's really about the application, and this goes back to bridging the gap. The practical application of what science is beginning to show us about cannabinoids. Again, new layers are being, I'm using my hands a lot today. New layers are being peeled constantly. And so, it's that 2 steps forwards, 3 steps back. And for such a long time,
evolution.
Yeah. Cannabis was touted as, everyone says it's not the panacea, but that was a feeling they had inside. Oh, it cures everything. Yeah, it can target everything, but we need to really, respect the changes that are happening in, again, growth, product, Jessica's
processing.
Cultivars that are now being grown with high CBG that may not have existed before. So it's a lot of moving parts.
And we know that sometimes too much of a certain cannabinoid can actually cause harm. So it's understanding the person themselves, their body, what's going on with them, and applying it to them.
That's a huge caveat, right? So no matter what research says, like, you have to observe how your own system is reacting to a specific cannabinoid profile, right? Not even the strain or, because people, the way that you both work with your patients and customers is really looking at the profiles of cannabinoids,
right?
Those ratios and different,
And I want to urge, I know a lot of the audience here are cannabis sales men and women. Sometimes they're called bud tenders, sometimes they're, there's a lot of different names. Consultants. When people are walking into your store, you're limited. You don't have time to share all this information. And so I think it's just about doing the best that you can to stay up to date on research within the parameters of how we're discussing this, and continue to question yourself, right? That's how you grow. That's how you get better. And just making sure that you're understanding, the advice you're giving on the floor or off the floor is really with another human being, right? And it's great to want to help and want to share, your new knowledge which is awesome. But I implore you to always end it with, but go do your own research, right? Keep
but
asking.
the thing is, where do people go do research, right? Like, for instance, if we're all getting this deluge of all these OSU articles, like how should someone who doesn't have any maybe research background, like how do we dig a little bit deeper to get some of these insights of like, well, what does that really mean for me?
Yep. One of my favorite resources. Well, so Jessica just said PubMed, right? So I will say
but
yes.
It does go in statistics. You have to be able to understand the
So
the charting.
Yeah. So there's
so PubMed is good if you actually are familiar with how to interpret studies and research. Right?
So what I'm gonna say is,
Oh,
I see someone saying, Michelle saying SCC.
Yeah. So we've got SCCI. Oh no, did you say? Oh no, it's SCC. Yeah, the Society for Cannabis Clinicians. And Michelle, thank you. What I was going to say is, you want to go to resources like the Society for Cannabis Clinicians, Project CBD, where you have people within the same plane that we are, taking this research and putting it into layman's terms, putting it into an easy read, right? And you have people vetting. Because you can go on any CBD website and they're going to give you information, but it's going to be spun, right? So you want these non-biased that are not selling products to give information. And I will say that's the one thing that we've always held steadfast to with our role in Polite, is that we're going to keep giving the research, and whether it matches our product lines or not, we're going to reformulate to stay up to speed with the research. That's important. You have to do that if that's what you're in this for. Any type of.
That's a good point. Like you were saying, 10 years ago, the best people could do for medical cannabis was, RSO and
right.
But that doesn't mean that doesn't change, or that now looking back, those people were wrong. It's the best formulations they could create.
That's what was right
at that time, right?
That's what was right at the time. That's what you had to use, and that's what you used.
But now, like you were saying, Jessica, we can cultivate cultivars. There's new as people realize, oh wow, CBN, CBG, these are beneficial. The cultivars are going to change. What we can literally grow and harvest and extract changes. So that's, I guess, maybe the advice is looking at keeping your eye on what's emergent and what's actually accessible, because those aren't always the same things, right?
Exactly.
And I want to, just really support, like I said, I see Michelle up here. I see Trey Reckling. Trey has, Trey, would you put up your education website? And Michelle, would you put up your site as well? Because I want people to know that there are resources out there, educating. The Academy of Cannabis Science, that's Trey. He has got curriculum that is going into different colleges. He does, there's so much. And Michelle, she does consultant work in functional medicine. And, we really want to empower all of us that are in this together. Right. And there's so many challenges.
And customers who have personal experiences with how the body reacts, right? And sharing the impact, right? Whether it was positive or negative.
Exactly. And, again, I feel like just even, calling out to Trey and Michelle, we have to continue to keep, Trey likes to call them our smart friends. Trey and Michelle, you guys are our smart friends. Continuing, because these are the people that challenge us, that, really kind of put our message out there, right? And I know all of you who are trying to give your message too. It's frustrating because there's so much that you want to do, so much you're interacting with, and answering questions like these. I don't know about you all, but my phone was ringing off the hook, like I said, from industry people, from medical professionals, from patients. Tell me about this study, right? And it's great, but let's share the love, and let's really educate in ways that we can share these webinars. And again, if anybody has a challenge, it's encouraged, because that's how we uncover.
It should be a healthy debate, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And again, there's always something new. We can't lay eyes on every new piece of research, and I love it. So we're really
it's exciting because of all this progress. Thinking about when we did start, these things didn't pop up as much. We didn't have to have these conversations because they weren't there.
Right.
And they weren't. The public the masses were not included in it either.
No.
No.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
what
and social media has been amazing
Yeah.
for that, right?
what are some of, so we have kind of the funny thing about cannabis-based medicine and cannabinoids is it's almost like everybody already accepts that it has therapeutic benefit, and the research just needs to catch up to it. You know?
Yeah.
That's one funny dynamic that's very opposite from the pharmaceutical paradigm, where they're trying to come up with new compounds to solve a problem, right? Where research is trying to catch up to what people already have known for millennia. But at the same time, like you were saying, we have this challenge where people can't wait 10 years for a FDA-approved clinical study, right? So you were both talking about how, actually, we're getting closer and closer. What are some of the active research areas? Like you were mentioning the Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, Jessica. Like, what are some of the overlaps of cannabinoids in certain conditions that are kind of further along the way to being closer to passing that human clinical trial kind of threshold?
Well, I think you have various types of cancer, right? And I will say cancer, but we're not going to blanket it, right? They're doing a lot with brain cancer, gliomas. You have Crohn's, IBS, IBD, a lot of the GI, and a lot of this comes from your spokespeople who have gotten out there. You have Colton, who was all about IBS, and that spurred him to work with people like Marvin Washington to get the word out there. And then that starts to gain the attention of researchers. Okay. So Charlotte, right, from Charlotte's Web and Charlotte Fiji, so these are, I think you're looking at epilepsy. There's a lot of research now being done on Alzheimer's. Columbia doing one, Duke University. Okay. Actually, migraines are really, really a substantial focus
autism
right
is
now.
The one at Children's.
Autism, so cancer, autism, migraines. There's a lot of neurological focus on cannabinoids.
And do you know these studies are being specific about cannabinoid profiles, or they really can only choose from
isolated compounds?
They're just like one. They're picking one and going.
We're picking one, to kind of focus the line of study, right?
Yeah. If you think about it in research, you have to eliminate as many variables as possible.
And so other cannabinoids is a variable.
So you're going to have to do this. And if the industry wants to stay up, then, embracing this. This is where I go back to isolated compounds. Again, I understand why we want to keep whole plant and keep it natural. And isolates, I mean, they are natural, right? You're just extracting it from the plant, essentially. But you have to do it right. So that's the difference, right? You want to do it right. You want to apply the practice of research. Everybody's been fighting for cannabis to be accepted. Well, we live in a society where you have to have the stamp of approval for it to be accepted. So you either come in, and I hate to, get crass about it, but come in to play the game or don't, because your plant that you grew in your backyard is not going to go very far in, when you have one person that uses it for cannabis and then all of a sudden 1,000 people want it. I mean, that's what happened with Charlotte's Web when you had the CNN documentary. Everybody now was looking for that, it was really ACDC R1 combination. And then all of a sudden people were literally within a couple months moving, to get access to this. They were on years of wait lists, and then the crop fails and they're looking for different biomass. So, and it actually caused a lot of harm to people with epilepsy because they thought they would have access to this, or they had access and there was no regulation on having to, talk about the formulation. And I love Charlotte's Web. I'm just saying this is the process and this is real life, right? It's very difficult to apply what you want out of something, and in business 101, scalability. Right?
So like you're saying, there's even a cycle, even after something is proven through research to be effective, there's a whole nother cycle of getting safe, consistent access.
Right.
And so that's challenging.
And then I'm going to challenge
all these things to line up for us as a layperson.
Right? Like, is your stance on cannabinoids? And this is a hard question to answer of yourself, because I had to do it myself. Is it really to push the benefits of this plant as medicine? Because that's what we say, it's medicine, but we don't want it pharmaceutical, right? Which again, I'm fully on board with. But
We want to take the good things.
I know, but you have to look at is it your personal agenda?
Mhm.
Because you want to be, the advocate for people who should have access to this plant. Yes. But by doing that, you're also excluding a lot of other people who, like I said, can't grow themselves, don't have access. We need, this is my issue with working with Japan, right? They couldn't even get cannabinoids integrated in there. I mean, we're working with the Minister of Health over there to try to change their laws. So by really harnessing isolates and importing, working with those patients, you'd have a lot of people that say, oh no, if we weren't pushing isolates,
They wouldn't get anything.
these children wouldn't get anything.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's better. It's better. It's the best they can do right now, given the laws, given what you can import, what's affordable at some reasonable scale. It kind of that whole.
Take what you can get.
And that's where it's about, like I said, yes, being an advocate is great, but look at what you can do
Realistic
from a legislative level, right? So great, stand on the bridge and hold your sign protesting, but get in there and read the bill and educate why you would want to vote one way over another, right? As we saw it in Washington with it being recreational. It was great, but it wiped the medical off the market, right? For a long time. And now, people are going back. It's kind of a mess. We all know that, but it's a beautiful mess because some wonderful things are coming out of it. It's really, like I said, it's just about, I feel like, going back individually and internally and thinking about where you stand on your messaging, where you stand on health and wellness, access to the greater good, right? I know by the Polite products, they're not high THC. We cut ourselves out of a lot of people in the market, but it was never about turning a profit. It was about getting access to people who wanted to come to Washington and use cannabinoids, but they couldn't bring the THC across state lines or they didn't have access. So by utilizing minor cannabinoids, Ayurvedic herbs, they were getting very, very similar relief, but they could use it legally.
You're allowing them to have it.
Yeah, and bringing in the clinical experience that you all have and the our physicians have with understanding that the minor cannabinoids are a lot of the secret sauce when it comes to fighting inflammation, when it comes to homeostasis and supporting immune function, right?
I feel like there may be listeners just burning right now, angry at me, but
just
it's
even,
not popular to say. Yeah.
Even the headaches, like for me, I know the studies like well, the THC, like no, the THC actually is increasing the pounding of the headache. It's knowing, I can go tangent on there too, so we won't go into that. But
So since we're almost at the top of the hour, maybe as a close. Well, also if anyone's listening and has a question, we have a few minutes left, so go ahead and post your question in the chat. But just to start to wrap things up, when you think about cannabinoid research from here on out, what to you, what are you most excited about? What are you, what's most promising, or what are the things that you are also tracking personally?
I know you go ahead, answer.
Well, I'm just excited that they even jumped on it. That it was even for me being from a hospital for 22 years. Seeing hospitals finally jump on board and jump into this with this positive, not trying to find the negative of it, but the positive of it, how it can help, and knowing that the doctors and the pharmacists and everybody else is on board and they're all trying to promote it. For me, that's a great thing. And as a personal, for seeing it in life, ALS for me is a huge one, seeing the studies in that and seeing how maybe CBG can start to, so that's a personal one for me on a side note. But yeah, for me, it's just the progress they've made and that they've jumped into this finally. As a healthcare worker, I felt such the stigma as leaving the hospital to get into cannabis that now I feel more accepted. Just having
those worlds can maybe
merging worlds now.
Yeah. And I feel like for me, it's hard for me not to get emotional when I talk about this. Everybody is willing to put money into research when it's a certain type of cancer that everybody has, right? That's where you're going to get your investors doing. Cannabinoids are now showing a lot of promise for more of these rare conditions. So I work with a lot of kids with something called DIPG, diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma. There's about 300 in the country that have it every year because typically they don't make it past a couple months from diagnosis. So when you see groups that are putting money into research that can benefit these rare cases that will honestly never have light shed on them, that's fascinating. And the wonderful thing about that is you have small groups of these cohorts that you're going to get a strong response from. So, you know, like ALS, right? Yeah, I mean, until we had the Ice Bucket Challenge, that really wasn't well known, right?
Yeah.
So now you have more people interested. And when you see, so they're interested, but there's no cure for it, right? You're hearing there's no cure. There's no medicine that it can even, you know, be targeted. So it's all symptom management. Now that we know with neurological studies, we can start applying it for, and I'm not going to say whatever reason, we know a little bit, you know, pharmacokinetically why, but cannabis is targeting these conditions that are not touched by, you know, general treatments is very exciting to me. And I know that by focusing in on these minor cannabinoids, right? Like CBC, you know, that has been shown to be in certain quantities, you know, basically as analgesic, as a horse tranquilizer, right? So when we can start, now, don't take that out of context and go looking for CBC. But my point is that, you know, people are starting to say, hey, when we have no other options left, you know, when we have pediatrics leaving the hospital and the doctors are saying, you know, you have to go home on hospice and there's nothing more we can do. Here's your list of medications. At the very least, understanding a bit of this research and the safety is giving them a better quality of life. Yes, you can reduce opioids, you know, for health and wellness. And I think that to me is exciting that it's starting to be looked at in these
the fringes of health too.
Yeah, where it's like that these people have always been on the back burner. You know, once the hospital can't do any more for you in hospice, you know, like that's it. And these are the boxes that you can check. And I'm going to leave it with this, that, you know, to all the practitioners out there, I hear from patients, you know, who are using cannabis, they're angry because their doctor only prescribed this opioid. Doctors have a box that they have to fit in. They are only allowed, you know, to prescribe certain amounts of certain products. So, you know, it used to be the talk about doctors getting paid to prescribe more opioids. You know, they're not. They are put in the position when you are a human wanting to help someone and the person in front of you is saying, I am almost suicidal, or if not suicidal, because I'm in so much pain, and your only option is to put them back on another med. You're going to do with the tools that you're given. So we are now with this research giving doctors more tools as well.
That's a beautiful way to put it, that cannabinoid research has the exciting potential to expand the healthcare provider's toolkit.
Yes, absolutely.
I want to make sure I touch on Chuck's question. He's asking, can you touch on how hospitals are dealing with cannabis? I was at UW, I'm assuming UW-MC is UW Medical Center for 10 years, left to follow my cannabis dream. Very much like Mary and Jessica.
Yeah, so
y'all shed light on maybe the exciting things happening with hospitals and cannabis.
Yeah, I think I'm going to keep this brief because you know, we kind of have a hard stop as well, but I think right now they're embracing it. Okay, so thank you, Michelle. Bye-bye.
Hi, Michelle.
I think hospitals are embracing it. I think the approach state by state that is now, you know, allowing it. Again, doctors are under federal regulation, right? They can only go so far. So doing research in Seattle Children's Hospital is phenomenal. You know, they have a lot of unspoken rules that they will allow parents to use opioids if it doesn't have a medical conflict. So being in Washington, you're in a great space.
Sorry, not opioids, right?
Oh, sorry, cannabis.
Cannabinoids.
You're in a great space here in Washington, and that's how we got our start. I mean, I was an elementary school vice principal, you know, and I had parents coming to me saying, we want to use cannabis for our kids. What do we do? So before I was going to give any advice, I'm knocking on doctors' doors saying, are you willing to listen? Are you willing to have this conversation? And so I think that's it, you know, is the pragmatic, practical approach to talking with doctors, being the audience that they can receive, you know, is so, I hate to say it, but it's so important how you present, you know, because your message is going to get lost if you're there protesting them, right? And it's about inviting them to the conversation. So I think you're going to see it more and more accepted. At the Ames Institute, we get most of our referrals from outside doctors, neurologists, oncologists saying, we believe in this.
Fine.
You know, the science is behind it, and we're willing to at least listen and be a part of your care, even if we can't drive it.
And that's the thing. If you're the patient going to them in the hospital, the doctor can't always tell you, hey, I think you should go start cannabinoids.
Right.
But they can say, hey, I think maybe you should look at Ames, or maybe you should look at SMJ Consulting, because that's their way of saying, yes, I support you, but without ruining the possibility of their license or getting in trouble.
Yeah, but I think you're finding it. And one more thing, there's a lot of credited organizations now actually providing curriculum for doctors. And so you're going to see a really, really expanding. And then we're going to stop talking now, but any other time we would love to continue this conversation.
I think that's why people like the both of you are so critical. You are the bridge between research, between healthcare, and between everyday people that actually everybody needs help navigating cannabinoids, because even people that go to medical school don't learn about it. So I think people like you both are the bridge, and that is so key. And thank you so much.
Well, and Sue, for you for helping to give this platform, and it's not just us. There's so many knowledgeable. One thing I appreciate that, you turned us experts, but that's something I always say, and I know you've seen it in writing, Sue, is that, because of all of the new emerging information, experts really don't exist, right? Everybody has the opportunity to learn. It's about what you want to do with where your focus is. So, and it's not an easy path to take by any means, but so thank you so much for having us.
I think that's a big takeaway, right? Cannabinoid research has to become a community-driven effort, right? Bridge all these emergent, knowledge, experiments, hypotheses, people, healthcare professionals together. That can be the bow on our conversation today.
Thank you so much, Sue.
Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Jessica, for taking time out of your busy day. And I look forward to doing more of this.
Okay. Thanks again, Sue.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.